Now, we're just days from the UK election, everyone getting ready to go to the polls. The question is, how do we trade this? And things are moving rapidly if headlines are to be believed. Joining me now is Liberum's Joachim Klement, and also from Windshift Capital, Bill Blain. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, a bit of a rant. I have voted many times in the UK, and I've never, ever got what I voted for, not even for Brexit. So, Bill, let's start with you first. How do you think it's going to pan out?
All right. So on the last general election, I really want my money back. I voted for Boris and I demand satisfaction. I should be repaid that vote. Completely wasted. Biggest mistake I've made. Now, in terms of how this election is going to play out, the markets are not in the least bit worried about the fact that it's going to be a Labour victory. The Tories have managed to snatch electoral rout from what was just going to be a stunning defeat. But the markets don't really care. And I think that's positive for the UK because, at the end of the day, we will get a new government and they are not going to be perfect, but we are going to have financial stability. Compare and contrast that, what we're likely to see in Europe in the coming months, especially in France, where we know the bond market is under pressure, and what we're going to see in the US later this year as well. The UK is going to stand up as a bastion of financial stability. However, I would caveat by saying that I think the UK remains in serious fiscal trouble because we are trapped in a straitjacket of financial orthodoxy. I think we can come back to that. And that's because after the Truster event 2 years ago, everyone is terrified of doing anything radical. And this nation needs radical financial solutions.
Joachim, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's going to go as markets think?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I didn't vote 5 years ago because I wasn't a citizen yet. So I have every right to whinge about whoever wins the election. But I would say that the markets are remarkably calm about Labour because Labour is refraining from any major experiment or drastic action. We can discuss whether we need drastic action, but one thing is clear. We don't have any fiscal headroom. We don't have any money. And the only way forward is to somehow inject growth into this economy. But how do you do that without being able to either cut taxes or increase spending? So we're literally caught in a corner as the UK. And basically, the electoral strategy by both Labour and the Tories is keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best.
You see, I'm going to disagree with that.
Oh, go on then.
I'm going to disagree. The financial orthodoxy says that we have no financial headroom. And that's really because of what Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng did, which is now being used across the globe as a reason why every single policy should be first funded and totally costed. Nobody's asking whether these policies actually will fix broken Britain or whether they'll have the significant growth and prosperity and productivity effects that are required to get the economy going. I think part of the problem is that Labour are so terrified of dropping the so-called Ming vase that they are being better Tories than the Tories. However, I would go to the issue of political competency, and we have clearly had political incompetency for the last 5 years. Although you got to say the Tories did pretty well during the pandemic. But aside from that, it's been political incompetency, certainly since Truss. Now we have a situation with a new government going in. And I think if the markets will support them, they actually can do things that will be more radical. We're going to have Europe as the most stable, the UK as a stable political economy. And I think that gives them the opportunity to be a safe haven to go out and sell more gilts to start restoring the economy. I know that's a wild and dangerous view to have of the gilts market, but I think we can do it.
Well, I would actually agree with you as long as we're selling those gilts in order to make the right investments, because the
we
UK
cannot be selling gilts to pay tomorrow's purchases. It's got to be planned strategically.
Absolutely. We cannot sell debt and hope that bond markets will like it when we sell debt in order to fund government consumption, otherwise known as social welfare nets. We need to invest in investments in infrastructure. We have about the worst communication infrastructure that I can possibly think of. Our energy infrastructure is absolutely terrible. And if you ask me as a trained physicist, why we're not rolling out more nuclear power, for example, in this country is beyond me.
Yeah, no,
Labour have actually come out, just to interject there, Labour have actually come out saying they will tax these oil majors because, as you both correctly said, there is no money in the coffers. So just bringing this back to how we trade this, are we going to see a short-term impact on these oil major stocks, for example?
No, I wouldn't see any reason for that because I think that's all built in and it's expected. I also think that we need to really think about being radical on taxation as well. There's been far too much, let's not upset anyone ahead of this election. But if you take a look at the economy, the poor have got massively poorer, the rich have got massively richer. That's the kind of thing that's got people voting for reform in the UK and voting MAGA in the States. You got to please these people and you got to restore equality in economy because that's the real thing that's going to come back and bite our bottoms off unless we're really careful. And again, I think the next government, and I don't care whether it's Tories or Labour because the difference between them is too thin to split. At the moment, Labour have seized that middle ground, and that's great because I trust them to be political competence when it comes to working out how to solve the equation, but they need to get radical.
So reform,
yeah,
is there any chance there, do you think, speaking to Joachim first, because we're seeing these headlines come through about how, polls showing that reform is gaining in the polls. Are we likely to see any sort of traction there?
Nah, I mean, reform is a sideshow. Yes, they're gonna win a few seats in parliament. Yes, they're gonna gain massive headlines. But first of all, they don't really have a political program besides stopping immigration. And the problem with stopping immigration is that who is going to deal with our labor shortage that we have in this country if we don't have immigrants? But that's a different story. No, in a first past the post system, it really is just about conservatives versus labor. And yeah, they both have very similar economic policies. Labor at the moment is obviously going to get a major majority in this next election. And really all that matters is the Labour Party and what they're going to do.
Labour also promising more help for house builders and also talking about potentially making poor quality land classified still as green belt to grey belt. Any of these promises excite you? I mean, the NHS promise about getting lines shorter. I spoke to many heads of workforce at the NHS and they laughed at it. They said this is something that is impossible given the government doesn't have any money to spend at the moment.
I think that's there are some multiple massive issues in the UK that needs to be addressed. Housing is one of them. The London economy is going to collapse unless we sort out housing. When you cannot have an economy without coffee shops. That's a fact. You will not be able to have baristas in London because nobody can afford to employ a barista on the 50,000 quid minimum salary you need to live in a one-bedroom sleeping bag tent anywhere within 50 miles of London. We've got to build social housing and get people affordable, decent quality rentals, or else London will disappear and it will spread over the whole economy. We are short something like a city the size of London because for the last 14 years, we've had, I think, 15 housing ministers, none of which have delivered anything. I mean, that's just one issue. Solving the NHS, that's another thing that everyone's too scared to do. Again, all these things from sewerage to the trains to the motorways, potholes, for God's sake. It needs radical solutions. It doesn't need, oh, let's get the IFS to go and do a costed fully funded analysis of it. Just fix the deep, deep, deep things.
Right, last but not least, many of our clients here, especially our premium end trade cable, of course, politics and the pound. How do we trade this? Joachim?
Well, sterling has been quite strong over the last couple of weeks. And this morning, we just learned that hedge funds have the biggest net long position in sterling since September. Usually that's the point of time when I start to get worried about sterling strength, because when the hedge funds have all piled in, why should you pile in after them? Clearly, sterling is anticipating a period of political stability. And that is definitely going to happen if you have a massive majority of 200 seats or more for the Labour Party. Even the cranks on the left of the Labour Party won't be able to derail the political agenda. So that's good. But never underestimate the Labour Party's ability to tear itself up after 6 months and create chaos of their own.
From the jaws of victory.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. So I would say the strong sterling is already there. There's not that much upside in the near term. I think where we do see a little bit more upside is when it comes to small and mid-sized companies in the UK that sell into the UK, that are domestic earners, that's where we haven't seen much of a move yet, because people are waiting for consumers to start spending more and get a bit more optimistic. And that's, I think, where the upside is still more interesting than in sterling.
And Bill, a last word from you on sterling. More downside seen for sterling?
No, look, I think sterling's going to be part of a general uptick in the UK. I am actually really positive about the UK. I'm very fortunate that I'm an honorary professor at one of Scotland's leading universities, Heriot-Watt, and the Edinburgh Business School. And I see the kind of stuff that's going on in the National Robotorium, which is up there, where we are building proper robots. And I don't mean the Elon Musk nonsense. I mean proper robots that do real things. That's going to be one small aspect of what changes the economy. In the UK, we've got enormous innovation and invention skills. We need to figure out a way of making these things work. That means changing bureaucracy, changing planning rules is absolutely critical. But I think one of the key things we need to get away from is this stultifying financial orthodoxy that everything needs to be fully costed and fully planned and fully funded. That's a hangover from Liz Truss. Let's exercise her ghost and move forward with a proper programme, not to fund the government day to day, but to rebuild broken Britain. If you do that, you create an enormous income surge, which will push up income tax receipts, and that will help the country pay off its debts. And if we were really clever, we'd do some liability management on the outstanding gilts in circulation. Remember, 30% of them are held by the Bank of England under QE. That is an asset on the bank's books. It's a liability on the Treasury's books. They're both part of UK PLC. Go figure it.
Thanks very much. Any last words there, Joachim?
Well, just one number, which is the so-called fiscal multiplier on government investments, which is between 1.2 and 1.4, meaning for every pound where the government invests in infrastructure and things like the stuff Bill explained, GDP grows by about £1.20 to £1.40. And go figure, that's how you generate growth, and that's how you generate the income without having to raise taxes.
Thanks very much, Panmure Liberum's Joachim Klement there, and also Shard Windshift Capital, and also strategist at Shard, Bill Blain. The election is, of course, the 4th of July, and you can take positions now, lead up, right after the weekend, all session stocks on the IG platform.